Projects were really revolving around the theme of education. So I want you to all just think to yourselves for a minute about if you were, or think back to when you were around 6 to 10, so you're in elementary school, and you're learning about climate change. You're learning about climate science. Someone's telling you that in 12 years, our climate will be radically different, and I want you to think of some emotions that you might feel at that age, what emotions might be coming up. So some of you might be thinking of emotions like anger or frustration or worry or fear, which is very natural. Raise your hand if you learned about the Amazon rainforest when you were in elementary school and like deforestation. So that problem seems like it's really far away, and there's this idea that Rachel and I kept talking about of ecophobia or biophobia, which is that these environmental problems seem so big and so scary that as a child, you don't know what you're going to do about them. I want you to look at this graphic and kind of think about how it might fit in with that idea of ecophobia or biophobia.
And Amelia was talking about elementary school students, but I've been in the school systems. I was a teacher, both traditionally and non-traditionally, and our 18-year-olds are feeling this as well. But I've been in the school systems and I'm seeing some really amazing things going on, and it's incredibly inspiring what some teachers, parents, other educators of any sort are doing, and it's even more inspiring what some of our students are doing. Our projects together focus on trying to engage, educate, and prepare citizens, our students, right? Citizens, be ready to act. And we're using this model. Amelia will focus on the yellow portion, wonder through understanding, and I'll finish off with leading all the way into action. Give a round of applause for Amelia Remington.
Creating a sense of wonder. So I'll tell you all a couple of facts about where I live in Oregon. The Siuslaw watershed historically used to see fish runs, salmon runs, of about 260,000 per year. In 1997, that number was down to about 500 returning salmon from the Pacific Ocean. Pacific-going salmon are an immensely important part of Siuslaw and other tribal nations' culture and their subsistence. And they're just an amazing creature that returns every year through the Columbia and the Siuslaw watershed specifically. Also returning tons of nutrients back to the ecosystems that create the forests that we Oregonians love and call home. And those are all some pretty interesting facts about Pacific-going salmon. I'm sure you're all very enlightened. But I figured it would be better to let a second grader from Mapleton Elementary School tell you all what she learned about steelhead this fall.
No, it's not pink.
So I don't know if you heard at the end, someone said, that's gross. So imagine that you're this child around 7 or 8 years old, and you're seeing this interaction with fish biologists taking steelhead out of the river in front of you. These students also afterwards got to dissect a steelhead and then learn about the importance of returning its body parts back into the stream. So this field trip is one of the many that was involved in my project this year. And maybe this student goes on to be a biologist, maybe she becomes an avid angler, or maybe she simply votes as an adult on environmental protections for her local habitat. So my project is titled Advancing Environmental Literacy in Oregon. Really thinking about ecology as the lens on which to view education and this sense of wonder. Environmental literacy is kind of this term that was coined by a group of educators and agencies across the state of Oregon. And they came together to create this Oregon Environmental Literacy Plan. Many other states have environmental literacy plans, but Oregon outlines 5 strands of environmental literacy. So basically what youth should be learning from kindergarten through 12th grade. And these involve strands such as systems thinking, personal and civic responsibility, all to kind of drive environmental education in the field. Unfortunately, this plan isn't widely used. It's a great document, but teachers report that they haven't heard of it or they don't really know how to connect it in their classroom. So what I did was I teamed up with a nonprofit called Ecology in Classrooms and Outdoors, or ECO. ECO has been delivering hands-on place-based environmental education curriculum in the Portland metro area since around 2005. And what I wanted to do is really look at their model, what they're doing well in Portland, and how it can be a model for regional expansion. So I was hired on with ECO as a project coordinator for my project. And we outlined 3 major goals for the year. These goals were 1, to create or establish our place-based units, which are essentially curriculum kits for classroom teachers and other agencies to use, and I'll go over that a little later. The second was the creation of a Lane County Eco Hub. So really looking at what ECO is doing well and our strengths and weaknesses in the Portland metro area, how we're reaching out to partners and schools, and what that would look like in Lane County, so outside of their original reach. Then the third goal was to create a best practices guide, basically outlining the work that I did over the year, successes and failures and recommendations for ECO's next steps when they want to go on to other regions in Oregon and implement the same model. So my systems diagram, you can kind of see that ECO does a really good job of intervening in places where teachers don't necessarily have training. They might not feel comfortable taking students outside. Funding, of course, transportation is a huge barrier for environmental education. Same with just the time to coordinate field trips and to write curriculum. So where ECO intervenes really can lead to students getting outside, learning about their place, and connecting with their local ecology. So my first goal with the place-based units, ECO has a wonderful set of ecology curriculum already, but it's not enough. So science standards are a way for students to connect with their place, and we integrate our next generation science standards, which Oregon adopted, into our place-based units. What I did was I looked at how to create lesson plans around English language arts, math, social studies, and art. And I worked with the ECO team to build out our place-based units. On this map, you can see there's kind of 9 distinct eco regions that the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife uses as their conservation strategy. So these include strategy habitats and strategy species. So I really wanted to look at how we can create each place-based unit to integrate the concepts of those strategy habitats. So agencies and teachers can take the place-based units and actually apply them to the place. So for 3 separate grade levels, I looked at 2 place-based units each. This was around writing 24 lessons total. And I also worked with the ECO team in general to generate ideas and get feedback, and also to help write these lesson plans. We were fortunate to get funding from the Spirit Mountain Community Fund to really drive our research around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and applying that lens on the place-based units, as well as funding for classroom testing, because teacher feedback is going to be a huge part of how we integrate these and then revise them later. And then the place-based units also opened up a huge avenue for us to work with partnership agencies. So an example of that would be we're working with the Wetlands Conservancy in Portland and the Tualatin Soil and Water Conservation District. to create a beavers unit. So land managers can take units, connect them with teachers, and then connect that directly to the landscape that they're working on. So they're not taking curriculum that was not built around that place or necessarily connecting to that place, and they're not using curriculum that doesn't align with state standards and next generation science standards. Goal 2 was creating the Lane County Eco Hub. So that involved a lot of work. I basically was a one-woman eco team down in Lane County, and you can see, so Lane County is this large green county. Down here, Eugene is kind of the metropolitan area. Portland's up here. And Lane County is a really unique county in that it spans from the foothills of the Cascade Mountain Range all the way west to the coast. So that involves 3 separate ecoregions. And as you can guess, the place-based students will have to be very distinct in the ecosystems that they talk about and the partnerships that we create. So working in Lane County also involved the takeover of a program that already existed on the coast. I implemented a pilot program in one elementary school in Springfield, in Thurston Elementary School. Overall, with this project and with some other mergers that we did, we went from reaching 2,800 students to over 6,000, which is 1% of all Oregon students. And a huge part of building this Lane County hub was building relationships, which is a common theme throughout all of our MEM presentations. But building those relationships with our partners is a huge piece of that. I want to talk a little bit more about the COAST program, which was the majority of the time that I spent this year. I was shadowing Jim Grano, a retiring teacher who had built a program on the coast since 1995. So as he was retiring, he did these train the teachers workshops in which he thought, oh, the teachers that have been participating in these field trip programs will now have all the knowledge they need to take over and plan all their field trips and get the bus funding and write the grants, which I can tell you all understand that's not necessarily possible for public school teachers. So through a series of different meetings, my boss, Sarah, met with Jim and they discussed eco-absorbing his program. So that was a huge part of what I was doing, was shadowing him on these field trips and understanding the work that it took to collaborate with partners, work with the schools, design curriculum, and educate. So I kind of wore all the hats, and you can see, here's me handing Pacific banana slugs to students for a banana slug race at a state park. The picture with the eggs is another one from the Whitaker Creek field trip in which they're dissecting steelhead. A lot of field trips revolving around ethnobotany and plant identification, and then some other kind of art and literature lessons as well. So kind of runs the gamut, and it's a really rich experience for these students. And I'll tell you a little story about that at the end. So the third goal was the best practices guide, which was really just a document that outlined everything that I did over the year, identified key partners that we'd like to work with in the future, as well as contact lists in the area of important stakeholders to connect with. I wrote up a framework for using a diversity, equity, and inclusion lens on our curriculum development. So a lot of that was inspired by workshops that I attended and trainings around DEI, and really looking at how we can involve all sorts of players and partners into our lesson plans so that they're not one-sided, and they use things like traditional ecological knowledge with permission, and other sorts of lenses in our curriculum, because we really want our curriculum to be forward-thinking and marketable. I also outlined kind of the steps that I took and recommendations for future expansion. So for example, we'll have to change our strategies as we look into Eastern and Southern Oregon. They're just very different regions. They have very different partnerships to be had. very different student populations. So my recommendations were really around maybe not calling us a Portland-based program. That was a huge one. So that guide was handed over to ECO as an organization and will be a live document for us to update over time and use in the future. I also put in a lot of systems in place organizationally for the ECO Hub and for the kind of the future of the hub. So we're working with the Sayusala Watershed Council to build a educator shared position so that we can have an educator that's local to the region of Florence and Mapleton. That educator share model will kind of serve as a model for working with watershed councils in the future. The key agency groups that we identified, or that I identified, were watershed councils, soil and water conservation districts, and Oregon State Parks. These three key players offer an avenue for us to create curriculum and provide educators that they might not have time to implement. Even if the part of their mission is education, it's often reported that they don't have staff time to create or educate students, or they don't have a connection with a school. It's really hard to get in with schools and get in with public school administrators because they're so busy, and public school teachers are also just, their schedules are crazy. So ECO kind of serves as that bridge with these partners. So it's a really awesome way to connect our students to these agencies who know a lot but might not have the time to do education. So I wanted to first and foremost thank my team, my ECO team. They're amazing. The work that we do, I feel, is so important. The story I was going to tell is we took a student from Mapleton, so about 15 miles from the coast, to this historic lighthouse that tourists from all over the world go to in Oregon. It's kind of one of the most photographed places in Oregon. It's about a 20-minute drive for them. And we took him out and we're hiking and we're like, oh, isn't Oregon's coast so beautiful? And he looks up, he's in first grade, and he says, we're in Oregon? Which just like blew me away and just reminded me like how important the work we do is. And I also just want to thank all of these partners. You'll notice there's a lot of fish on there, and I couldn't do what I did without them. So thank you.
We have about 20 people at the distance as well, and so I just want to alert them. Let us know, just unmute your mic and ask questions, or let me know via chat.
Rich.
I'm curious as to how successful this program is at being equitable to students and teachers in the underserved communities.
Yep. ECO started as only serving Title I schools. So that's still a huge part of our program, is really reaching the Title I schools, especially in the Portland metro area. In Eugene, since it's so new, it's kind of building those relationships with the school districts and kind of seeing where the need is. But we're reaching out with the Oregon Natural Resource Education Program through OSU Extension, which will help us to identify kind of which schools have the most needs or are underserved. And then the other part is really just that relationship building, like talking with teachers and hearing from teachers like, wow, we haven't had a science curriculum in 10 years. Or, which I think Title I is an excellent way, an indicator to reach out to those types of schools, but I think those stories also help to kind of put the pieces together of who doesn't have this type of education in our community.
Great, thanks.
What's a Title I school?
A Title I school is a school that receives, I think it's 70% free or reduced lunch.
Yes.
So did you start working for them as an intern, or this position that you had with your project? And are you continuing working with them in the future? Did you land a job there? What's your role?
I did land a job. Yeah, so I reached out to ECO last January, just looking at organizations in Oregon that I knew were doing the type of work that I wanted to do, and their programs just seemed like right up my alley. And I reached out to them and they started this internship, which was the project. But then the relationship with Jim Grana on the coast started, and I was hired full-time to manage that merger. And now I will be continuing to be a program manager in Eugene, both managing the coast programs and and prospecting for new schools in Lane County.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Can you explain the evaluation process that you gave to the teachers to see how effective I think your curriculum was?
Yep, evaluation, as many of you know in nonprofits, is an ongoing thing. It's always something that nonprofits don't do as well as they should. There was a training offered around evaluation, around curriculum evaluation last year that I didn't have time to attend, so I'm hoping that this next year we're going to have a lot more professional development around program evaluation. We do have teacher surveys and things like that we've been implementing since we started. So that really helps us to determine what kinds of things are working and not working with our teachers and with the students. We also use a lot of the materials we get from the students as formative assessments. So writing samples, worksheets, things like that will really help us to identify like, are students getting it? So that's an easy way to kind of work it into the curriculum. So I guess my short answer is it's worked into the curriculum for us to be able to evaluate the effectiveness, but evaluation is ongoing. Yeah.
We have a couple from the distance. I don't know if we'll have time for both during this part, but first one, Jill Young, has there been follow-up and how the students are interacting with this program?
Has there been follow-up? Yes, we're hearing lots of great things from the students. Like I said, the assessments that they give us in the form of like writing or quotes from the students are really a way for us to understand how it's working.
Okay, is there still time for one more?
Yep, one more.
It's from Pete Wampler. I'm curious if you had more success getting schools to participate by getting principals and admin on board first, as a first contact, or contacting teachers directly?
It just depends on the situation. I had success in Eugene contacting teachers directly from knowing them personally, but for example, on the coast, we have a lot of buy-in already from the administrators, or a lot of times like we'll have a new principal come in and they'll say, I really value this and I want to keep it going. So it kind of depends. And that's my thing.
I'm so excited to share this with you guys. I just want to say that at first. It's been so much work and totally worth it, but it's just really good to be here. And thank you all. Thanks distance people for being here. Yeah, so I'm going to focus on, like we said, this portion of the model. I'll start out by talking about my teaching career. Whoops. I started teaching and about 5 years ago, actually, and kind of strangely came across a new friend of mine, Tatenyo, if you're there, hi, and he lives in Accra, Ghana. And we started talking and we tried to figure out how we can collaborate, and we decided, why don't our students write pen pal letters? These are my students in my classroom receiving their first pen pal letters, and they were even more excited to see their pen pals receive their letters. I wish I could zoom in on this because for some reason it's really cool to be able to see that's like my name and our students on there, so that's really cool. But that was really awesome. And when my students and their students started learning about each other, we learned a lot about the culture and the norms. And my students found out a lot of things, such as the fact that a lot of these students didn't have access to electricity in their homes. They're like, well, how does that even work? I can't imagine a house without electricity. And they also found that they don't have a lot of access to reference books and storybooks, and English is the primary language in Ghana, but not often what's spoken at home, so they're trying to practice. So that day, actually, I had to change my entire curriculum because we were supposed to learn a whole bunch about technology. Instead, we ended up having an entire discussion that was student-led about how we can solve this problem. They put together a video announcement looking for books as a book drive for the school. That is the amount of books that we got, and that's actually a picture from Ghana. So that's really cool. So that went to Ghana, and they fundraised to be able to do that by selling donuts in the morning, which is really sad because so many kids buy donuts. But so that was really awesome. That inspired me to actually change my entire curriculum for the next year. Instead of just teaching technology and then this cool pen pal program, I started teaching environmental technology because, dang, if kids are making this huge impact in one way, they could potentially make an impact in something that I care about. And I took my kids out to, this is Red Feather, Colorado, mountains. A lot of them hadn't been, just like Amelia was talking about the lighthouse. A lot of these kids had never been to the mountains before. They ran around, they climbed, they found bones, they learned, they did some observational science, smelling, looking, feeling, all that kind of stuff. And then when we returned, we reflected and they loved it. And I told them a really evil white lie that, evil white lie goes together. But I said, wow, now that whole place is gonna become a gravel pit. And they were so angry. They started like fighting and trying to figure out ways, well, we should put that somewhere else. Why would they do it there? That's crazy. And they tried to solve it. And it led to really great discussion and an entire curriculum that was for renewable energy, and there was nature and art, and it was really cool. So seeing this inspiration from my students empowered me. This was before the MEM program, or the MEM program, actually led me to be here. And like I said, or like we spoke about, this ecophobia, there wasn't ecophobia here. We can do this kind of stuff. And it was amazing. So, students, this is really, really simplified. If you want to talk to me about the like tons of factors that are stopping kids from being agents of change and global leaders, come talk to me about that. But for presentation's sake, here's the simplified version. My project aims to tackle the fact that students oftentimes aren't able to become global leaders and agents of change because of these 4 reasons: lack of empathy and knowledge, education, and lack of access to education in many senses, and then which is in turn linked to cycle of poverty and environmental degradation. That all kind of loops together. I worked with 5 organizations to tackle these issues. And that's my project, Building Bridges and Empowering Global Leaders. I'm Rachel Weakland. I connected 5 organizations with similar missions to empower, educate, and empower and educate you to act on global issues through cultural immersion and access to traditional and non-traditional educational opportunities. So I'll talk you through these 5 organizations and my affiliation with them. So the first one is called Build On, and it's an awesome program that works with some of the poorest countries in the world. And they build schools in rural places where there's not normally access to education, and there's a huge story behind that. But anyway, 50% of girls, or 50% of the students are girls, which I want to talk about, but it's really important for climate change and the economies of communities. My affiliation, this was the first thing that I started when I joined the MEM program, is to raise $27,000 to build a school in rural Malawi. And in doing that, I held multiple fundraisers, including beer giveaways, a beer and food pairing event, like beer, and it's like a teacher thing, I think. And even hosted a drag show, which was really, really fun. Through all of these and many more, and grant writing and everything, I really raised up to 70% of the total goal, which is over $18,000. So we're almost there, which is really great. The next organization is called Global Leaders, and you'll see global leaders throughout this entire presentation. Well, let me tell you the story first. A student came in asking for a donation for their biggest fundraiser of the year into our family business. And my family's like, Rachel, just go figure out if this is a good organization or not. And so I looked up the organization, and that same day I fell in love with it and said, this is the exact organization that I want to work for. And that same day I brought my resume in, really awkwardly without an appointment, and just gave it to them. And after 6 months of nudging, emails, calls, just going in, I got an internship, which was really great. And then 6 months later, I was hired on. So I love Global Leaders. They're awesome. They empower, they empower youth to become leaders through service work, locally and abroad. Each and every one of our high school students in Fort Collins, we work with all of the schools in Fort Collins, every single student dedicates 60+ hours to service work in their community. So that includes student-initiated food pantries at their schools. And so that's completely student-initiated and student-led, and it's weekly instead of monthly. It's awesome. And mentorship programs for at-risk elementary school students and more. So that's 60 hours, 9 months, community, locally. Then it culminates in a 14-day service trip in Guatemala, where we work on reforestation, coffee farms, just a big story behind coffee farming, and a student-initiated project of clean stove installation. She found out about this by talking to the community and going and seeing their homes that the walls are black and doing a whole bunch of research and collaboration to install, I don't know how many stoves we've installed. Maybe like 20 stoves because it's very new, but we're gonna go and install 25 more this year. Our students are, I should say. So like I said, Global Leaders will pop up throughout this entire presentation because now I'm going to talk about Earthship Biotecture. I was in Puerto Rico in January helping to build these structures. They're made from waste material. They're hurricane safe. They provide food, shelter, water in the case when all electricity and everything goes away. And after that trip, we get to take now middle school students with Global Leaders to go learn about all of this stuff and even get their hands dirty and start building themselves. And that's maybe my biggest contribution to Global Leaders, and I'm really proud of it because that curriculum was built and it's a 9-day trip and it's happening next year. So that's really exciting. It's empowering students to act. Here's some of the pictures from the trip. That's the entire crew. I'm really sweaty in the middle. And it's just beautiful and wonderful, and our kids are gonna be immersed in culture, and that's great. The next organization is Iracombi. The first summer I was in the MEM program, I was actually doing all the readings and work at Iracombi, and I loved it. This is in the Atlantic rainforest in Brazil. It's a reforestation center and research center, and I was helping to work with their environmental education program. The goal, it's an ongoing goal, Western students come talk to me, is to create an affiliation with both Global Leaders and Western. So all of these MEM programs, all of these projects could definitely be done here. So we're aiming to get students to come to Iracombi, do their MEM program or projects, as well as potentially join the Mountain Resilience Coalition, because this is a mountain community. In this is Binka Liberton. Hi, Binka. I was lucky enough to get to come to Western with Binka, and she's in Brazil now, so that's kind of cool. She spoke with students and staff about potential partnerships, and this is her talking to Dr. Hausdorfer about the Mountain Resilience Coalition.
I look really relaxed.
She's very nice. She also got to speak to my Global Leader students about parallels between their environmental education program and the work that their students are doing and the work that our Global Leader students are doing. And my students fell in love with her. Literally every single kid came down and gave her a hug. Can I come? And actually, our Global Leader staff is considering maybe doing a scouting trip there as well. So, the final organization I'm going to talk about is Alliance Enfants du Monde. And this is an awesome program. Remember that initial pen pal program I was talking about? Well, once I stopped teaching and came to school, I connected another teacher with it at another school so that it was sustainable. And these are students receiving those letters. And this picture just hits my heart. Tatenyu sent me this picture, and he said, these boys came back to school because of those books that were served, because now they have access to actual reading material. So that's really, really touches your heart, or my heart, I don't know. And Global Leaders is going to be partnered with this organization as well. Thanks to the Haley Fund, we were able to purchase a 3D printer to address the issue of lack of access of electricity in their homes, and we're able to print 3D solar lamps. They're the same thing. This is one of our high school students and a middle school student. It's Students Empowering Students. The middle school student here is actually teaching our high school student how to construct this lamp. So that's so cool. Yeah, so it's going to, hopefully, the plan is that this will expand and be in other classes around the area. So the outcomes, there's so many organizations. I got a job, which is great. $76,000 were raised for kids. I forgot to mention, in Global Leaders, my job is now grants and fundraising coordinator. I led about 11,000 so far, and then helped on a team effort for about a $45,000 fundraiser that we just had in the end of April, which is really cool. Over 400 students were impacted this year alone, hopefully expanding. Hundreds of pen pal letters were written. The lantern designs are complete and ready to send next year. Earned 4 grants, a curriculum was built, and partnerships between 5 different organizations and hopefully Western 6 were formed. Lots of next steps, and in general, did you put the 1 minute up?
No.
Okay, great. Global Leaders and Alliances Months Du Monde, just connecting the students. That's actually a fairly easy step. And continuing to collaborate with middle school to expand the program. For Earthship, just continuing to work with all partners to make sure that the program is set, the curriculum's built, because it's going to be, once again, a year-long curriculum for middle school students within that school. And then just buying the tickets and making it happen, which is really cool. Iracombi, this is where I need some students. Anybody who's interested in the MEM program or who wants to do a project, come talk to me if you're interested in GIS, water quality monitoring, environmental education, medicinal plant usage. There's so many opportunities here at Iracombi, and I also need somebody to kind of take over the alliance of the Mountain Resilience Community, or Coalition. And with Build On, just a small portion of money needed, just kidding, it's a lot actually, but totally achievable. Need $8,000 to build that school, and I'm talking with the drag queens again to make another show. So hopefully that happens, because that was very fun. Thanks everybody on here. There's so many people. Jess, thank you. Melanie was a huge help in the Iracombi portion, so thank you. To Tenyo, Joe, Digby, Binka, my family, my amazing family, just thanks. And gracias. It's so lame, I want to cry. Yeah.
One quick question. So I noticed that you're saying that this is kind of the Global Leaders is in all Fort Collins schools. Is it in any other schools outside of Fort Collins, like to the rural schools or anything like that?
I wish. Hopefully someday. We used to have a branch in California. Various reasons that's no longer it's no longer.
Yeah.
And we used to be in Colorado Springs. We're working to, there's actually, say all schools in Fort Collins, there's still one more school that we need to reach out to. And we're working on kind of outreaching. So hopefully it'll be outside of Fort Collins soon. We're very small. Yes.
If your community is interested in Global Leaders, how would they, show that they are interested to have them come to the community? That was horribly said.
No,
Sorry.
I just didn't understand. Could you say it again?
Yeah, like if a community is interested in having Global Leaders come to their community, how can they have that happen?
Oh, like for example, if Puerto Rico wanted our students to come and do something.
Yeah, or anything like that.
We need a marketing person. We really do. Honestly, we go out and we have already connections built with these places, and we've done that. It's financially steep for students to be able to travel for a lot of places, and we have really awesome financial aid available for our students, and we try to be as inclusive as absolutely possible. We have a work and earn program and everything like that, but in order for people to ask hey, we need student help. It's harder when they're high school students to get a huge group there.
What
So,
if-
I guess.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what if it is like a county, like Gunnison? Like, what if the Gunnison High School wants to get involved in global leaders in some way? Is that possible?
That would be amazing. We need teachers who are involved and engaged and constantly in communication with us. And that's been our largest issue in outreaching to Fort Collins schools, is getting that one teacher that students trust. And they're gonna say, oh, you think it's a good organization? Okay, I trust you. Because they don't trust us, we're strangers. Jess.
This is coming from a distance. And by the way, there's at least one private message from a member that's interested in this for some project development. I'll connect you to later. There's 2 questions now. The first one is, well, there's 3 questions. Some of these may have to go into the 20-minute. What barriers do you face in connecting with the culturally diverse communities? So when you go abroad with the students, what barriers do you face with connecting with culturally diverse communities?
Okay, so there's definitely a language barrier. We do this humongous 2-day retreat where we talk, before our Guatemala trip, we do a 2-day retreat where we talk to students about the history of Guatemala and about privilege and perspective and kind of all of that, and trying to prepare them for a different way of life. They stay with host families and are completely immersed, and it's pretty hard for some of them, is my understanding. I haven't gone yet. I get to go in June. But we practice Spanish with them. We try and prepare them to be as open as possible and have open communication, be polite, be welcoming, and to hug our host mamas.
I think you actually answered the next 2 questions as well.
Oh, great.
Could you speak to a little bit of how you provide inclusivity for students here in America that want to participate? So you did talk a little bit about financial need, but do you seek out schools that are diverse or rural or?
Yes, our goal is to have 50% of our students from families that need scholarship. So right now we're not quite there, but we do recruiting and try and make it inclusive for everyone. But the actual steps that are taken, we do tons of fundraising and we have students who are on payment plans, and we also have work and earn students who come in on their own time, like after school, and they do office work for us or any kind of work, really, setting up auctions, and we pay them $15 per hour of the work, and that goes straight to their program fees. And that program is actually, I'm really excited to share, and I didn't share, that program, that Work and Earn program, is now changing to include other nonprofits and entities within Fort Collins that are making strides towards environmental sustainability. Like Vindicate is a program where they divert food from the landfill by taking expired food and selling it for very cheap. And some of our kids are gonna hopefully start internships next year with them and the Humane Society. So Work in our program. And that's time. So thank you. And now we have 20 whole minutes to ask any questions that you would like for us both. Yeah.
Thank you. First, I am really fascinated because of how you are taking all this in the education aspect, because education is really essential for us to continue our mission in this beautiful planet. In your work with the global leaders, you will continue working with global leaders?
I hope so. I hope so.
Yeah, Joe was an amazing guy, so yeah, I think it's a great partnership. And it seems like you have now also like a lot of things to do within global leaders. How will you continue these projects like going and you making your effort as a grant writer? Because grant writing, for me, is kind of like just one role. You can do more than that, but how can you, how will you continue doing these projects, and how this community of students can reach out to global leaders or whatever you both are working with in terms of the next steps?
So you're asking how to handle all of those things?
Or the beautiful initiatives that you have done. all the beautiful initiatives that you
Okay.
have all done, how you continue it.
Oh, okay. Lucky enough, it's my job, so I get to spend all day, every day doing it. And there's an awesome team at Global Leaders who are constantly working as well. So we, as a team effort, we tackle all of these things throughout the day. I don't know, we just do it.
To give a support on that, on this question, so I met Joe Fontana when they went to Puerto Rico, and they're beautiful people and a beautiful vision, and they were saying all these struggles that we have to face to approach people a message, and he told me, use the kids to take the message, and that's for me was like, exactly. Because for instance, I'm from Puerto Rico, when we go to and propose like sustainable action plan for this municipality or whatever, they're like, but if we present them with the kids, so by saying this, how then we take the kids to present this message, to take this message, because it's kind of difficult, this kind of ages and stuff, I don't know. That right now there's like climate change, Kids for Climate Change stuff as another movement. So kids are also taking the advance. And by adding that, I want to say also like this generation of kids are the Generation Z. And Z, I'm like obsessed with recycling. I can see them as the zero waste generation. So, I don't know. Yeah. This is conversational. But
I would agree that marketing is a huge piece of that, and Rico definitely utilizes that with using our students to talk about how great the program is. And we just won, this wasn't like my part of my project, but we won a free video from 100 Seconds in Portland, and they created a video interviewing all of our students on a project that's going to be a marketing tool for us. So that's really great. And like we're working with the Sayula Watershed Council, and they also got funding for this amazing video project where they got camera crews on all of their restoration projects. And that's just another way that we can really outreach to the community. I mean, through Facebook, and it's crazy how much that really reaches a lot of people. But yeah, using our students and using our partners' work and really pushing it as we're helping this agency, or we're working with this agency who's doing this on the groundwork. I think it's moved away from, and what I've noticed, especially in environmental education, which is usually very siloed, like we're doing our program here, like we don't have time to collaborate or whatever. It's definitely breaking out of that, and we're doing a lot more working with other environmental educators. Like it's not this, like we're our own program, we don't have time to work with you. It's like, how can we write a grant together? How can we partner? So it's really, I think that is kind of our biggest push right now, is like breaking down those silo walls, and also the marketing piece.
Since you're allowing 20 minutes, I thought I'd talk. Was that Earthship International kind of a exponent of Earthship that started in Santa Fe, Taos?
Yeah, it is. Same exact company.
Do they have kind of a franchise for commercial builders to build their style with cement and stucco? And
Yeah, they have their Earthship Biotecture, and then they have a commercial area, and then they also have a nonprofit where they go and they build in natural disaster areas and things like that.
If they run into problems in New Mexico, they were having legal things back in 20 years ago. Earthship wasn't completely ecologically sustainable. Well, they were gray water problems, stuff like that. It was more to do with the developers of the Earthship type stuff.
Right, they weren't reaching certain
Dennis
regulations.
Weaver's son was not doing the good stuff. It's more New Mexico stuff.
Yeah, luckily they didn't have that problem in Puerto Rico.
Oh, yeah.
Jess can speak
No, I was gonna ask a question as well.
Oh, okay. I know that they did have regulation issues before, but they're continuing to build houses now, so I imagine that
Yeah.
they found a way over that. Just,
So I'm going to, there's a question that's a little bit specific to you, Rachel, but I think it can go across both of you. And the question had to do with recognizing our parents sometimes a barrier or a tough sell, but I'll ask in a more general sense is, how do you interact with parents in the organizations? And what advice do you have for those that are going to be doing education programs about parents?
Yeah, so a lot of our programs are field trips, or we're calling them field experiences, because that kind of breaks down that idea that we're just out to play and it's not school. But we have so many parent chaperones on our field experiences, which is a great way to connect directly with parents in that sense. We also have materials that we send home with students when we are in the classroom that are little postcards that say ECO's in your school, and this is how you can contact us if you have questions. And then we also work directly with teachers to give them kind of tools about like how they can talk to their students' parents about the program and what we're teaching. And just being really open. We also have an after-school program up in Portland, and that's another place where we interact with parents the most. So I'd say like the chaperones and then the after-school program. But really, creating those marketing materials that we can send out and having that messaging as part of our system is how we connect with parents at ECO.
as global leaders, we work directly with parents, actually. Countless phone calls, and actually our parents help us with procuring items for our fundraisers, as well as some of our other service projects. We want to include parents. We want them to feel comfortable with their students in our program and taking their students abroad, and are constantly in contact. Barriers, yeah, there are barriers, as always. Their child is their most important thing. So every teacher has a problem or success or both with parents. And just talking to them and being open, because I truly believe, and I think that our staff believes, that our program is really solid and pointed in the right direction, and sharing that with parents and being completely open with everything with parents. There's a lot of trust that's built there.
Thank you.
Rich.
I was reading where Global Leaders also engages in the U.S. Southwest, so I'm wondering which communities and what, since that's closer to home here, and what are their needs in those communities?
Oh, very cool. Okay. Sadly, I don't work in this aspect of it. It's like a sister, we're the umbrella organization, and this is an organization called Girls' Rights, and it's so cool, actually. Youth girls partner with mentor women from the community, badass women, and they build a relationship and they do service work together, and then they go embark on this journey throughout the U.S. Southwest, and I'm not exactly sure where they go. I wish I did. That's terrible, but it's somewhere. You can look on it in the U.S. Southwest, and they go and they visit Native American tribes, and they camp and they build relationships, and that's really cool too. So it's a cultural immersion.
I bet there's an Amelia question.
As well.
There is one, for Ethan wants to know what your favorite fish is.
I was just learning about kind of, and I'm like very new to fish biology, so pardon me, but I was just learning about like the evolution of like coho and chinook and how that split, and like the genetic diversity that was created within their like habitat specific, anyway, science words. Coho and chinook are awesome and have very interesting facts about them.
Well, I first just want to say, like, congratulations to both of you. Like, this was, the amount of stuff that you did is, it's incredible. So, yeah, this was awesome. Amelia, I know that you kind of touched on maybe some of the voids, or, some of the missing pieces in our education system here. I think you said something like, they hadn't had a science curriculum in 10 years. Through your projects, do you think you could kind of talk about some of the things that you didn't realize were an issue in our education system that you learned through your project?
Yes, I learned a lot. It's very state by state. I mean, our education systems are very state run. That's how it works. But the next generation science standards and how they've been adopted by states is a very interesting thing to look into. So states can adopt them completely, or they can kind of revise them as they want to and then adopt it as a state. So for example, Montana basically adopted the NGSS, but without any climate science. So I thought that was interesting. In Oregon specifically, speaking with administrators, just the funding gaps that exist was just insane. Like I knew it was education's underfunded, but the idea that the budget is like 30% funded every year is like just depressing. And other initiatives, like I'm all for PE, like I think health education is super important, but Oregon just passed like a 30-minute mandate every single day, which is awesome, but it just, the amount of time teachers are already stretched to get everything into the day and then adding another 30-minute mandate, which is really like not 30 minutes, it's like an hour. Just those types of requirements or mandates around testing and time spent in classrooms just was really eye-opening for me. The science curriculum thing was really big, so listening to teachers talk about how every year they'll have like a budget in their curriculum, district budget for, usually they'll revamp reading first, literacy. And what I think is interesting is science literacy is also reading literacy. So the fact that schools aren't implementing science curriculum is such a failure to me. Most teachers are using YouTube for science curriculum. So.
One more question. Luann?
Get to ask it, all right. So like, I think of myself as in the Magic School Bus Captain Planet generation. Like, by like environmental indoctrination as a very small person. Like, what do you feel like the touchstones are for the generation that you're working with, and what do you think they're gonna be able to accomplish?
I'm just thinking of things that my kids watch. They still watch Bill Nye the Science Guy, which is cool. The touchstones, I don't know. What do you think, Amelia?
Well, I'm just like a huge proponent of the place-based education. So that's really what my work is in, is taking students to their schoolyard or a nearby park and really learning about the nature there. And I think what's cool about our panel is that we kind of show both ends of the spectrum, right? It's like, as an older student, you might want to tackle global issues, but you don't know how, right? But as a younger student, there's so much opportunity to go out onto your schoolyard and learn like native and non-native, like what is that? What does that mean? How has the movement of species across borders, whether good or bad, what does that mean? What does that mean for management? There's always going to be a decision. And I think what's really interesting working with young students is using that as the kind of like the cherry on top of like, you don't have to have the right or wrong answer, but just think about what it is that is the management decision there, because humans have intervened in every corner of the globe. So what does that mean for fish? Do we prioritize that over that, over that? So I think for me, it's really those like really local decisions, connecting with local ecology, and then that kind of builds into connecting with local community. So I don't know if that really answered your question, but yeah, for me, it's really just like the place-based, like really sensory immersion, like getting that understanding and then moving into.
And well, it's the same actually. I feel really strongly that it's the same for high school and middle school. So it's nice alignment, just getting kids nature deficit disorder, getting them outside and making a relationship, like building, oh wow, I actually like sitting in the mountains. That's, if kids, like we had said, sorry, I got really uppity about that. Our kids hadn't been out into the mountains. Her kids haven't seen, they didn't know they were in Oregon anymore. They hadn't had that opportunity, and there's tons of reasons why that might be the case for every single individual student, but they haven't built the relationship yet. And I think if we can get them to make the relationship and get them outside, because we're so stuck in traditional education where our tests that we take now are on computers. I don't know if you know this, and a lot of schools don't even have access to computers. So if you're having a kid take a test on a computer that doesn't even know how to run a computer, that's a different story. Regardless, we gotta get them outside.
We're going to do an even louder applause for 2 new masters in environmental management.